I'm sorry. You voted? I kept my grip on the coffee pot, steam rising between us, because it was the only thing stopping my hands from shaking. Lilia leaned back in the chair like she owned it. Her nails, pale pink, glossy, perfect, tapped against my kitchen table. Dean and I decided you won't be at the wedding. You can keep the $60,000 deposit if you want to feel useful. Think of it as your contribution to your future grandchild. That word, grandchild, hit harder than any insult. This was the same kitchen where Dean ate cereal in dinosaur pajamas, where he practiced his graduation speech, where I lit candles for his 21st birthday. And now, a woman who had known him for barely 2 years was cutting me out of the most important day of his life. I set the pot down before I dropped it. The hiss of steam filled the silence between us. Dean would never agree to this, I said. Oh, but he did. Her smile was too smooth, her blonde hair too precise, her designer dress whispering as she stood. We talked about toxic family dynamics. He asked me to handle this. Toxic. That word didn't belong to my son. Demanding, maybe. Overprotective, sure. But toxic? That was hers. You're right about one thing, I told her. This is hard to accept. A tiny line formed between her brows. Not for the reason you think? She stared at me, measuring, deciding how much resistance I'd give. Then her voice turned to ice. The decision is final. Either you accept it gracefully, or we do it the hard way. Either way, you're not coming. Her heels clicked across the tile, the door closing like a gavel behind her. The house swallowed the sound, leaving me alone at the same table where my son once did math homework. I walked to the window, watching the street where he learned to ride his bike, where he played catch before the divorce, where he brought home every stray animal he could find. My boy would never do this. Someone else was pulling the strings. And as the shadows stretched across the lawn, I felt something shift inside me. Lilia thought she'd silenced me. She thought 62 meant powerless. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I picked up my phone, not to call Dean. Margaret, I said when the line connected, I need to know who Lilia really is. Margaret didn't waste time. 3 days later, she arrived at my house, a leather bag slung across her shoulder, her silver hair pulled into the same no-nonsense bun she'd worn back when we were both in HR. She placed a thick manila folder on my coffee table and gave me the kind of look only a seasoned investigator can give. Half pity, half warning. You were right to call me, Dolores, she said, settling into the armchair across from me. Your future daughter-in-law is quite the piece of work. The folder sat between us like a bomb. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a chart of dates and company names, most marked with red X's. Employment history, Margaret explained. Or, more accurately, a trail of wreckage. In 5 years, she's worked at 7 companies. Always quits voluntarily. Always cites hostile work environment or personality conflicts. I scanned the list. Several were prestigious firms, places where people fought to get a foot in the door. These are good companies, I whispered. Exactly, Margaret said. I called a few contacts. The pattern is the same. She inserts herself close to the most powerful person in the room, creates friction with others, then plays the victim until she leaves. Nothing illegal, nothing traceable, but chaos in her wake. The next sheet was worse. A single sentence leapt off the page. No high school records, no college transcripts, no previous addresses before age 25. My breath caught. What do you mean, no records? I mean, it's like she appeared out of thin air, Margaret said flatly. People don't erase their past unless they have something significant to hide. It takes effort and money. I felt the room tilt. Dean had told me her parents died in a car accident. What about that story? I asked. Margaret shook her head. No obituaries, no accident reports. Either she lied about their deaths or she lied about who they were. I couldn't verify a single detail. The coffee in my mug went cold as I flipped to the next section. Screenshots of text messages. Margaret had highlighted the names: Mike, James, the Hendersons. Dean's best friend from college? His coworker? Even the neighbors? Look at how she frames it, Margaret said, tapping the printouts. Mike is immature. James is jealous. Mrs. Henderson made passive-aggressive comments. Piece by piece, she rewrote Dean's world until everyone he trusted was suspect. I thought of the Hendersons, who had brought cookies every Christmas, who checked Dean's house when he traveled, and now they were villains in her story. She's been rewriting his reality, I murmured. My hands trembled. And saving the biggest target for last, Margaret said gently. You. The printouts showed conversations where my concern had been twisted into control. My offer to help with planning the wedding had become an attempt to take over. My suggestion about venues had been painted as a refusal to let go. Every word I'd spoken out of love had been weaponized. I pressed my palms into my eyes, as if I could block out the image of my son reading those messages and believing them. She's turned me into the enemy, I said hoarsely. Margaret didn't deny it. Instead, she slid another envelope toward me. And then there's this. Inside were lab reports. My stomach dropped when I saw the bold heading, Pregnancy Panel. The result box was clear, negative. But that wasn't the line that made my chest seize. Below, in smaller print, was a full STD screen. One result was highlighted in yellow, chlamydia, positive. I stared until the letters blurred. No, I whispered. Margaret's voice was steady but grim. These results are recent, 3 days ago. She told Dean she was pregnant, but there is no pregnancy, and she's exposing him to disease. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. My son, faithful, loyal, kind, was being infected by a lie. This is criminal, I said. There's more. Margaret leaned closer, her voice dropping. Her real name is Lily Chen. She's 32, not 28, and she's done this before. 3 confirmed cases: Seattle, Denver, Portland. Different men, same pattern: fake pregnancies, sudden crises, drained bank accounts, and a vanishing act. The folder might as well have been a coffin. Every page nailed shut another piece of the life I thought Dean was building. How can I tell him? My voice cracked. If I walk in with this, he'll think I fabricated it. She's been laying the groundwork for months, telling him I'm manipulative. If I confront him now, it proves her right. Margaret sighed. That's exactly her strategy, which is why we need proof he can't deny. Something so undeniable even she can't spin it. Proof he can't deny. The phrase stuck to my ribs like a stone. I leaned back, my head against the sofa cushion, and closed my eyes. That's when a memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago, a warm evening on Dean's patio. I'd stopped by with mortgage documents, let myself in with the key he insisted I keep. I heard voices outside. Dean's voice, full of excitement. I can't wait to tell Mom about the baby. She's going to be so happy. Then hers, cool and deliberate. Actually, I think we should wait. Your mother's been stressed. This kind of news might overwhelm her. At the time, I thought it was concern. Now I saw it for what it was. Calculation. And then, a phone call while Dean was in the bathroom. Her voice muffled through the glass, but certain words had pierced the air. No, the timeline hasn't changed. Yes, after the wedding. He's completely isolated now. The mother won't be a problem much longer. I had dismissed it. God help me, I'd dismissed it. My eyes snapped open. The folder, the reports, the screenshots. They were devastating, but not enough. Not against the months of poison she'd dripped into my son's ear. I needed her own voice, her own words. I turned to Margaret. We need proof he can't deny, I said, echoing her. And I know exactly how to get it. Margaret studied me, her dark eyes narrowing. What are you thinking? I thought of the sliding glass door, her cold tone, the way she'd spoken like Dean was a mark on a spreadsheet. "I'm going to get her talking," I said. "On tape." "I'm going to get her talking. On tape." Margaret studied me, lips pressed into a line. "That's dangerous, Dolores. If she even suspects—" "She won't," I cut in. "She thinks I'm beaten. She thinks I'm desperate to crawl back into her good graces. That's when people show their real face." Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a small black case. Inside, nestled in foam, was a device no bigger than a car key fob. "Voice activated. Battery lasts 12 hours. Don't fiddle with it. Don't check it. Just let it run." I picked it up. It felt absurdly light for something that might decide my son's future. "How do I know it's recording?" "There's a single LED, she said. "Cover it with tape if you're worried she'll notice. And Dolores, don't push her too hard. Let her talk. She wants to win. She'll hand you what you need." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. Every rotation felt like a countdown. Lilia had been tightening the noose for months. Now I was the one setting the trap. 2 days later, the phone rang. Her number. My pulse jumped. "Dolores," she said, her voice syrupy, rehearsed. "I've been thinking about our conversation. It didn't sit right with me. I'd love to meet for coffee, just the two of us before the wedding. Clear the air." It was a trap. Of course it was. But it was also the opening I needed. "That sounds nice," I said evenly. We set the time for Wednesday afternoon at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place with potted plants in the windows and acoustic guitar humming through hidden speakers. Perfect cover. I arrived 15 minutes early, device already tucked in the side pocket of my purse, activated. The LED blinked once before I covered it with a tiny square of black tape. My hands rested calmly on the table, but inside my chest, my heart was pounding like a war drum. Lilia swept in on the dot, radiant in a cream-colored dress, her hair cascading in waves. Heads turned as she passed. She smiled like a pageant queen when she reached me. "Dolores, thank you for meeting me. I know things have been tense." I forced my lips into a polite curve. "Coffee solves a lot of things." She laughed lightly, motioning to the waitress for some complicated concoction involving almond milk and caramel drizzle. I noticed she didn't order food, not even a muffin. So much for morning sickness. "I've been thinking about family," she began once the waitress left. Her tone was gentle, manufactured vulnerability. "About the future, about what's best for Dean and the baby, the phantom baby, my non-existent grandchild." I nodded. "I've been thinking too." "Good." She leaned forward, her perfume thick, cloying. "Because I have a proposition." There it was, the bait. "I'm listening." She lowered her voice, conspiratorial. "Excluding you completely. It might not be the best approach. After all, you are going to be this baby's grandmother." She let the word linger like a bribe. "So I thought maybe we could work out an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" My voice was steady, casual. Her smile widened. "Dean and I have been talking about finances. Starting a family is expensive. With my morning sickness, I haven't been able to work as much. We're looking at houses, bigger places, safer neighborhoods. But we need help with the down payment." I tilted my head. "How much help?" "50,000, she said smoothly, like she'd practiced the number in the mirror. "I know it sounds like a lot, but think of it as an investment in your grandchild's future. 50,000, half my retirement cushion." "And in exchange?" I prompted. Her eyes gleamed. "In exchange, we reconsider the wedding invitation. And of course, you'd get to be involved with your grandchild. Supervised visits, maybe babysitting later. Once we're sure you understand our parenting philosophy and can respect our boundaries. Supervised visits with a grandchild who didn't exist." "That's generous," I said slowly. "But tell me, why isn't Dean here having this conversation himself?" For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. A flicker of irritation darted across her face. Then she smoothed it over. Dean's sensitive about family dynamics. His father's abandonment scarred him. He asked me to handle this. Lie. Dean and I had fought, sure, but he never outsourced conflict. He faced it head on. I pressed further. 50,000 is significant. I'd need to talk to my financial advisor. She lifted her cup, hiding her eyes behind the rim. Of course, but we're hoping to make an offer on the house this weekend. Time is a factor. Classic pressure tactic. Manufacture urgency before the mark can think. I let a silence stretch, just long enough for her to lean forward. Then I asked softly, "This baby means everything to Dean. Have you thought about what would happen if something went wrong? Complications? A miscarriage?" Her reaction was instant. Not fear, not sadness, irritation. "Why would you even say that? That's incredibly negative." "I didn't mean—" I softened my tone, like I was apologizing. "I just know how excited he is. If something happened, it would crush him." "Nothing's going to happen," she snapped, then quickly pasted the smile back on. "My doctor says everything's perfectly normal." "Oh, wonderful. Which doctor? I'd love to send flowers. A thank you note." For the first time, she blinked too long. "Dr. Johnson, at Women's Health Associates." I tilted my head like the name meant something. "Is that the office on Elm Street?" "No, downtown, on 5th. There was no Women's Health Associates on 5th Street. I'd checked every clinic weeks ago." "Of course, silly me," I said warmly. "I get my streets mixed up. When's your next appointment? Maybe Dean could send me a picture of the sonogram." Her smile froze. "We're waiting until the 2nd trimester. My doctor prefers caution." Another lie. At this point, she should have been well past 12 weeks. The device in my purse caught every word, every contradiction, every slip. We danced this way for nearly an hour. Her pressing for money. Me feigning hesitation. Each question I asked nudged her further into the corner she had built for herself. By the time she glanced at her watch and declared she had to leave, I had everything I needed. The demand for 50,000, the threat of limited access to the baby, the lies about doctors and addresses. She rose gracefully, smoothing her dress. "I hope you'll make the right decision, Dolores. For Dean's sake. For the baby's." Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor. She left the cafe as if she had just negotiated a treaty. I stayed seated, my hands trembling only now after it was over. I ordered another coffee, giving the device time to finish capturing the air. When I stepped outside, the late afternoon sun blinded me. My phone buzzed. Margaret's name. I answered, voice still shaky. "I got it. Every word." "Good," she said, but her tone carried weight. "Dolores, there's more. My contact at the clinic saw her last week. She wasn't alone." My heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she was with another man, not Dean. They looked close, too close." My source snapped photos. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of traffic. "Who is he?" I whispered. "Marcus Rivera, pharmaceutical sales rep, married, 2 kids, and he's been paying for a hotel room here for months. I'll send you the pictures." My knees nearly buckled. I braced myself against the brick wall of the cafe, breath shallow. Margaret's voice softened. "Check your email, then decide how you want to use this. The wedding's in 5 days." I looked down the street where Lelia's figure was disappearing into a sleek black car. My purse felt heavy with the device, my phone heavier with the new evidence on its way. She thought she held every card. She thought I was just a mother, powerless and discarded. But now I had her voice, and soon I'd have her face caught with her lover. I straightened, the city noise swelling around me. "Margaret," I said quietly, "get the tablet ready. If she wants her show at the wedding, I'll give her one she'll never forget." The grand view. Ballroom stood like a monument to extravagance, its floor-to-ceiling windows catching the late afternoon sun. I parked at the edge of the lot and sat for a moment, my fingers tracing the navy fabric of the dress across my lap. The same dress I had chosen months earlier, back when I thought I would sit in the front row with pride, watching my only son pledge his future. Now it would be my armor. Inside my purse, zipped tight, was the tablet Margaret had prepared. Every file, every photograph, every lie preserved in pixels. I touched the bag once, grounding myself, and stepped out into the shimmering heat of the asphalt. Each click of my heels across the pavement sounded louder than it should, a metronome marking the march toward war. At the entrance, a uniformed attendant raised a hand. "Guest list, ma'am?" "Dolores Hoffman," I answered. He glanced at his screen, confusion clouding his face. "I'm sorry, I don't see—" "I know," I interrupted. "I wasn't invited, but I am the groom's mother. And I will not watch my son be destroyed without a fight." Something in my voice stilled him. After a pause, he lowered his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." The doors parted, releasing a wave of cool air and the heavy scent of roses. The ballroom glowed with opulence. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished marble. White roses curled around every arch. Guests murmured in designer suits and glittering gowns, a sea of Lilia's acquaintances, people who looked more like investors than family. At the altar, Dean stood in the tuxedo I had helped him pick out. My heart twisted at the sight of him. Handsome, yes, but dimmed, like someone had turned down the brightness of his soul. He shifted from foot to foot, jaw tense, as though he felt the wrongness but couldn't name it. Then there was Lilia. Draped in imported lace, veil cascading like spun sugar, she glowed with satisfaction. A predator disguised as a bride. The officiant's voice filled the air. "Marriage is a union of love and trust, a joining of families." The words tasted bitter. My hands clenched. Finally, the line came, ceremonial, meant to pass without response. "If anyone knows a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now, or forever hold your peace." The room hushed. "I do." My voice rang out, sharper than I expected. Every head turned, gasps scattered through the rows. Dean spun, eyes wide. "Mom?" Lilia's mask slipped into fury. "Get her out of here!" she snapped at the nearest guard. But I was already moving, pulling the tablet from my purse. "Not yet," I said. "Not until everyone sees the truth." The screens behind the altar flickered to life. Margaret's careful planning. She had secured the AV system days ago, pretending to be a videographer testing equipment. Now it was mine. The first image appeared, an official lab report. Bold letters stamped across the page. Pregnancy test, negative, dated just 1 week earlier. Murmurs erupted. "Your bride," I said, projecting my voice, "is not pregnant. She never was." Dean staggered backward as if struck. "That's a lie," Lilia's voice cracked. "My doctor confirmed everything." "What doctor?" I asked. "Women's Health Associates on 5th Street? There is no such practice." The next slide showed the directory listing, no results found. A ripple of disbelief swept the guests. Lilia's bouquet hit the floor with a thud. Her jaw worked, but no words came. I tapped again. The photograph filled the screen. Lilia in a clinic waiting room, her hand entwined with a dark-haired man bending to kiss her. Beneath, text identified him. Marcus Rivera, married, 2 children, paying for a hotel room in the city for 3 months. A collective gasp broke the air. Phones lifted, guests recording every second. "Meet Marcus," I said evenly. The man she clung to while pretending to house hunt. The man who paid for her hotel when she claimed she was sick. The man she kissed before a lab test that proved positive for chlamydia. Dean's knees buckled. He dropped into a chair, face buried in his hands. Lilia shrieked, lunging toward me. "You ruined everything! He was supposed to be mine! The house, the money, all of it!" Security grabbed her arms as she thrashed. Her voice, shrill and raw, rang through the ballroom. The pristine bride vanished. In her place was a woman unmasked, claws bared. Guests recoiled. Some rushed for the exits, others whispered frantically, the scandal already blooming in their minds like wildfire. But I wasn't finished. Another tap. A collage filled the screens. Articles, documents, screenshots, names and faces of men from Seattle, Denver, Portland. 3 different lives, 3 identical patterns. A fake pregnancy, financial bleeding, sudden disappearance. "Your real name is Lily Chen," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You're 32, not 28, and Dean is not your first victim, just the next in line." The officiant had stepped back, pale and shaken. Guests muttered, some clutching one another. Lilia screamed curses, threats of lawyers, lawsuits, revenge. But her words sounded hollow now, drowned by the weight of proof glowing across every screen. "You wanted a stage," I told her. "You wanted to perform. Well, here's your show. Every lie exposed." Security dragged her back, but she twisted, spitting fury. "You don't know anything! I'll take it all! You can't stop me!" Her confession, raw and uncontrolled, echoed against the marble walls. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence. And then I pressed the final icon. The speakers crackled. Her voice filled the room, smooth, syrupy, unmistakable. 50,000. Think of it as an investment in your grandchild's future. Otherwise, the wedding goes on without you, and you'll never see the baby. Every guest froze. Even Lilia stopped struggling, her mouth hanging open. The words hung in the air like smoke. I turned toward my son. His face lifted slowly, pale and stricken, eyes locked on the speakers as if he couldn't believe the voice he heard. The ballroom held its breath, waiting for him to speak. And I knew the next moment would decide everything. Her voice spilled from the speakers, smooth and merciless. 50,000. Think of it as an investment in your grandchild's future. Otherwise, the wedding goes on without you, and you'll never see the baby. The ballroom froze. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. For a long second, no one moved. Then came the sound, an audible wave of gasps, mutters, the scrape of chairs. Dozens of phones lifted into the air, recording. A woman in the second row whispered, "My God," loud enough for the hush to carry it. Dean swayed where he stood. The tuxedo I'd chosen with him seemed suddenly too big, hanging on him as if it belonged to a stranger. His eyes darted, panicked, searching for an escape from the nightmare. He collapsed onto the nearest chair, his face buried in his hands. Lilia thrashed in the grip of 2 security guards, her veil sliding sideways, her hair tumbling. "It's fake!" she screamed, voice jagged with rage. "She paid someone! You're all blind!" But her own voice still hung in the air, undeniable, preserved in speakers and in every phone recording. The damage was done. Guests streamed toward the doors in clusters, heels clicking against marble. Some fled, unwilling to be caught in scandal. Others lingered, transfixed, their phones raised like witnesses at a trial. Within minutes, the rows of chairs looked half empty, white roses and silk ribbons framing a battlefield rather than a wedding. I walked forward, each step deliberate. My heels echoed off the marble, steady as a drumbeat. I stopped beside my son. Dean looked up at me, his face stricken, pale. His lips trembled as if words were shards cutting his mouth. "Mom." His voice cracked. How could I not see? I bent slightly, close enough that only he could hear. "Because you loved her," I said, "and because she made sure of it. She studied you, Dean. She learned what made you kind, loyal, trusting, and she turned it into chains." His eyes flooded. He shook his head. "I called you toxic. I believed her." I placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, careful not to overwhelm him. Just an anchor, not a claim. "You trusted. That's not shameful. That's who you are." And she preyed on it. His chest heaved. A sob ripped through him, raw and unrestrained. "I thought I was protecting her." But I was destroying us. You're here, I said firmly. You're still here. That means she didn't win. The ballroom emptied until only fragments of people remained. Scattered friends of Dean's, staff frozen near the walls, security restraining Lelia as she spat curses. Her mask had disintegrated. You don't know anything, she shrieked, her voice ragged. I'll take it all. You'll see. The house, the money, it was mine. Her confession echoed like a siren. Guests who had lingered gasped again. Even the guards holding her exchanged glances. Dean stared, wide-eyed, at the woman he thought he loved. His voice was little more than a whisper. I don't even know her. No, I said softly. You never did. The officiant slipped quietly from the room, the ceremony abandoned. The flowers, the satin, the music, props in a play that had ended in ruin. Finally, the head of security barked, Clear the venue. Staff moved quickly, ushering out the last of the shell-shocked guests. The grand ballroom, once staged for celebration, now looked gutted, chairs overturned, petals scattered like confetti after a war. Dean rose slowly, shoulders slumped. He didn't look at her as they dragged her screaming through the side door. He couldn't. His face was hollowed out, grief and shame carved deep. We left together, our steps echoing down the marble hall, leaving behind the wreckage of what was supposed to be his wedding day. The days that followed blurred like rain against glass. Calls from lawyers, emails from investigators. Margaret in and out of my living room with binders that grew heavier each time. Dean barely left the house. For a week, he slept in the guest room, shadows under his eyes, waking at odd hours to pace. Once, I found him at 3 a.m, sitting at the kitchen table in silence, staring at nothing. They all saw, he whispered. Every friend, every colleague. They saw me believe her. They saw me humiliated. I sat across from him. What they saw was someone deceived by a professional, someone she had practiced on before. What they saw was you surviving. His laugh was hollow. Surviving. I feel gutted. You're still breathing. That's enough for now. Investigators from 3 states began to piece the puzzle. Philip Harrison in Seattle spoke first, his voice shaking but resolute. He described how she had convinced him of a pregnancy, how she'd drained his accounts and disappeared. Marcus Rodriguez in Denver confirmed the same. Manipulation, lies, a fabricated miscarriage. David Kim in Portland told the ugliest story of all. A sham marriage, an affair with his business partner, $200,000 embezzled before she vanished. Marcus Rivera, the man in the photographs, was pulled into questioning. Ashamed, married, but willing to admit what he'd done. He confirmed the hotel bills, the relationship, the way she spun stories that made him feel like her savior. His shame only added weight to the growing case. Dean listened as the testimonies piled up. Each story was a mirror of his own, proof that he hadn't been alone, proof that her manipulation was systematic. Still, the shame ate at him. One evening, as we washed dishes together, he said, I don't know how to live with the fact that I chose her over you, that I believed she was right about you. I dried a plate slowly. Because you were taught to believe the person you love. That's not a failure. That's your heart doing what it's meant to do. What matters is that you see now. His eyes softened, glistening. You never gave up on me. I met his gaze. Never. By the 2nd month, subpoenas arrived. Court dates lined up. Margaret's evidence, my evidence, was stacked in boxes marked for federal review. Fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. The list of charges sprawled like ivy. Dean found himself testifying in preliminary hearings, his voice quivering but steady enough to matter. Each time he spoke aloud what had been done to him, it stripped her power further, returning a piece of him. The press caught wind. Local stations ran segments about romance fraud and predatory manipulation. Dean hated the cameras, but when he saw the comments online, other victims confessing their own silence, their shame, something in him shifted. If my humiliation means someone else recognizes the signs, he said one night, then maybe it's worth it. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. That's strength. Then, one bright morning, Margaret called, urgency in her voice. Turn on Channel 7. Dean and I scrambled for the remote. The screen filled with Detective Sarah Chen standing outside the courthouse, cameras flashing. Her voice rang clear. Thanks to the courage of victims and the cooperation of private investigators, we have charged Lily Chen, also known as Lilia Hartley, with wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes across 4 states. The feed cut to footage, Lilia in handcuffs, orange jumpsuit stark against the courthouse steps. Her hair was tangled, her face hard. She looked nothing like the glowing bride draped in lace. Reporters shouted questions. She snarled, but gave no answers. Dean's breath hitched. His hand reached for mine, gripping tight, fingers warm and trembling. On screen, Detective Chen continued. This case demonstrates the devastating impact of manipulative fraud and the importance of vigilance. The bravery of those who spoke out has prevented further crimes. The camera zoomed again on Lilia, her wrists cuffed, fury radiating from her like heat but useless now. Dean exhaled, a sound that was half sob, half release. He turned to me, eyes brimming. We did it. His hand held mine, not with desperation this time, but with certainty. And in that moment, I knew he was right. Dean's hand squeezed mine as the news anchor's voice faded into commercials. The living room felt smaller, warmer, as if the weight that had been pressing down on both of us had finally lifted. His face was pale, but the lines of exhaustion I had grown used to were softer now. His eyes, once dimmed by doubt, held the glimmer I thought I might never see again. We did it, he whispered again, like a prayer. I looked at him and saw not just my son, but the boy he used to be. The boy who rode his bike up and down this street, who carried home stray dogs with hopeful eyes, who believed the world was good. That boy had been nearly erased by manipulation. But he was back now, sitting at my table, hand in mine. Life after the scandal wasn't simple. Healing never is. Dean stayed with me for a while, the walls of his house too heavy with ghosts. The guest room became his refuge, my kitchen, our meeting ground. On Sundays, I made blueberry pancakes, his favorite, and we talked about everything and nothing, politics, football, even what flowers to plant in the yard. Slowly, the shadows receded. At night, though, I still heard him pacing sometimes. Healing doesn't erase the echoes, but each morning, he emerged steadier. Neighbors who had once vanished under Lilia's stories reappeared with casseroles and quiet words of support. The Hendersons came by one evening with a basket of cookies and a hug that lingered. We knew she was lying, Mrs. Henderson told Dean, but we didn't know how to reach you. He cried in their arms, and for the first time, his shame began to loosen its grip. The legal system moved slowly but steadily. With Margaret's evidence and the voices of victims across states, the case against Lilia became ironclad. Headlines called her a serial con artist. Detectives described her manipulation as textbook. I saw her name on the screen and felt nothing but resolve. For Dean, though, the story wasn't just about courtrooms and charges. It was about reclaiming himself. He began speaking to support groups, first reluctantly, then with growing confidence. He told them what it felt like to be isolated, to have your love weaponized against you. He talked about shame, about silence, about the power of family who refused to let go. And people listened. Survivors leaned in, nodding, tears in their eyes. They saw themselves in his story, and in his survival, they found hope. One night after a meeting, he came home buzzing with a kind of energy I hadn't seen in years. "Mom," he said, pacing the living room. "We need something bigger. A place victims can go when they realize what happened. Counseling, legal advice, financial planning, all of it. I watched him, pride swelling. A foundation? Yes. We'll call it the Hoffman Foundation. After you. Because you refused to give up on me. Tears blurred my vision. Dean! No. His voice was steady. You saved me. Now we save others. Months later, I stood in a modest downtown office as Dean cut a ribbon in front of a small crowd. The sign read, Hoffman Foundation for Victims of Romance Fraud. Reporters snapped photos, but my focus was on my son. Tall, confident, his voice ringing strong. Being deceived doesn't mean you're weak, he told the room. It means someone exploited your strengths, but strength doesn't end there. It begins again when you face the truth and rebuild. The applause that followed wasn't just for him. It was for everyone in that room who had been broken and stitched themselves back together. That evening, as the sun sank over the neighborhood, Dean and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Lilia once tried to buy my silence with arrogance. Only now, the space was filled with laughter. He shared a story about a man who had reached out to the foundation, someone who found courage because of Dean's testimony. I just realized something, Dean said, pausing mid-laugh. I'm happy, not pretending, not performing, just happy. I smiled through tears. That's all I ever wanted for you. He reached across the table, taking my hand gently. You gave me back my life. No, I said. I reminded you of who you always were. The journey taught me more than I ever expected. That love is fierce. That truth requires courage. That even when trust has been shattered, healing is possible. But most of all, it taught me that a mother's instinct, the quiet tug that says something is wrong, should never be ignored. It is not weakness. It is wisdom sharpened by years of love. Lilia underestimated that, and it was her undoing. Now I'm curious about you, listening to my story here. What would you have done if it were your child standing at that altar? Have you ever had to fight for someone you love, even when they didn't believe you? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from, how far this story travels. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Roots and Secrets, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family, when it's true, never gives up. Because if this story proves anything, it's that love, real love, outlasts every lie.